back of your program yet in this session. If you did, you'll know a few things about me. You'll see the headlines of my schooling and my experiences in service and my identity. Who doesn't love a good highlight reel? Am I right? But we all know there's more. That's what makes living amazing. Living a full life can never be attained into a few descriptive lines. Today I would like to share a formative part of who I am that was not included in those lines. You see, it did not include what allowed me to embrace hope while living in the tension of the unknown and waiting. And I do mean tension. Just like many of you, waiting is not my strongest virtue. Waiting for this today has almost killed me. When I was younger, I was waiting. I was the worst waiter. I'm terrible at it. If my popcorn took too long on the stove before the Muppet Show, I became agitated and crazy. As a young driver, I would zoom in and out of traffic, completely irresponsible, I know, but impatient all the less. And then I also am super impatient when it comes to decisions about what's next in my life. I sometimes jump full 2 feet right in without ever having the due diligence and discernment that it needs. Saying yes can often get you in a place where you're not answering your calling again. Thankfully, I learned that being impatient did not give me much room for the uncomfortable tension that is necessary for change and growth. That uncomfortable tension shakes a person up and inspires them to pay attention to calling and service. And over time, I have learned that the rewarding part of life is waiting. I know, I sound like a complete crazy person to you right now. I am going to advocate waiting. Whoever in their right mind would advocate waiting as a rewarding practice? But I guess now I'm an agent of change as a result of learning to wait. There's no getting around waiting, and how you wait is important. In my life, there have been 2 primary forms of waiting. There is the patient kind of waiting, where I know I have to trust in God and what will come. This kind of waiting is completely unnatural to me. But over time, I have decided that the love of God is greater than my doubts and fears, and that the hope I have in God is the hope God has in me. And then there's that impatient kind of waiting, where I realize that waiting is actually torture, and that it's placed where faith can be constantly questioned. If you're like me, you know, breathing and with a pulse, so that's everyone here today, you may actually know this waiting all too well. We all have to wait in these in-between times, waiting for news, good or bad, regarding health, safety, and welfare of our own or ourselves. While we wait, we are tested. Our faith is tested, our hope is tested, and this is my experience I want to share with you of waiting. It was a cold winter's day, and for my husband and I, it was completely isolating and overwhelming. We hunkered down to wait for the future to happen so that our present lives could change forever. It was a day that was a long time coming. And it was about 270 days, give or take, and yes, I was counting. These days seemed to take a lifetime, and they tested every bit of my well-being. I had to rely on hope. Hope that all would be okay, that all would be safe, and that the unknown would be all right. I had to have hope in that what could not be fully seen. My first child was born at the end of this day, this cold winter's day. On that day, we waited and hoped in the unseen as it intersected with the celebration of his new life and also his first Christmas on December 25th, 2002. A moment where heaven and earth collided in the joy of a new life. We had been expecting our son the same as any other new parents have or will. We hoped he would be healthy and that all would be well. We hoped he would not come too early, even though I was impatiently waiting. And we hoped that the changes ahead of us as we embraced for becoming a family of 3. We had to keep our faith, even on the days when pregnancy was challenged with preterm labor. Looking back now, I think my son actually has a patience problem. He had it coming from the womb even. His impatience led to weeks of back labor and multiple trips to the maternity ward, only to be hooked up to monitors and then sent home to continue laboring because they wouldn't let him out. I was told all this pre-delivery activity was within the range of normalcy for our upcoming delivery. Of course, being a first-time, completely freaked out mom, it didn't seem very normal. Yet there was hope that a time was coming that they would keep me and let me deliver. But they didn't keep me. They monitored and they medicated and they sent me home to labor for a while longer. I was sent home to hope and not panic in the unknown. My story may or may not be different than your own story of birth, or your mother's story of your own birth. Laboring is about waiting. Waiting for the labor pains to start so that a new, unknown future can begin. I think that's what Paul was getting at when he chose relating creation to labor pains in Romans 8, verse 22. Labor then and now is excruciating and hard work. And Paul's audience knew that the process did not happen with certainty of health and safety for the mother or child during delivery. So why did Paul use this metaphor of birthing? Paul used this feminine and maternal imagery of God so that his audience could understand that new creation is only born from old creation, and that it's about hoping even during the hardest work. Theologian N.T. Wright believes that right now creation as a whole is in labor, longing for God's new world to be born. Now hold up, did you catch that? Have you ever considered that all of creation right now, including each of us in this room, are in labor right now? It's okay if you need to start going, because that would be normal. Because I promise you, you will not see the world the same when you leave this place today and you think of this whole world as a delivery room. Laboring, like life, isn't easy. We are laboring constantly with all of creation. Even though laboring personally, for me, was the hardest thing I've ever done, it filled me with yearning and hope, not to mention waves of pain. Unmeasurable pain that I would have told you I never could have endured without the hope in the unseen. That new creation was my hope unseen. That new future was my hope unseen. As I prepared for this moment with you today, I spent a great deal of time not only remembering the birth of my first child, but I also spent time feeling connected in a very intimate way to all the women who have labored before me. Have you ever stopped and had that realization before? We all got here the same way. I know I take that for granted all the time. All of our mothers endured and birthed us into creation, from old into new. Labor was part of my son's creation story of life, and it was part of mine as well. Laboring and birthing was something I now share with generation and generation after women since the dawn of time. In that moment of delivery, I was created in mind, body, and spirit to care for my child. I was a newly created mother out of the labor pains of a previously pregnant woman. Here I had unknowingly joined in the creation story of life. I had labored, and I actually remember the exact feelings I felt when the nurse placed my son in my arms for the first time. A rush of hope flooded over me as the love I had grown for my unborn child was able to be manifested between he and I in that very moment. In Romans 8:22-25, Paul wants us to renew our hope in God, our God that cannot be seen, but yet we can see God in all creation, and we can wait together in hope. Baptist theologian James Dunn observed that believers are being saved not from creation, but with creation, and that we are all privileged to share in the creation with Christ. We are creation. Our call as believers is to live fully in between the past and the unknown for all of us in the future, while keeping our hope in God. For by embracing hope, we are renewed and challenged. Paul calls us to rely upon our gifts, the gifts of the Spirit, to not live in our past ways, but in the promise of Christ in a newly birthed way. We should live lives in ways that others feel the hope we have in our unseen God, and that our lives become beacons of hope for our families, our communities, and every interaction we have as Christ-believing people. In Theology of Hope, Jürgen Moltmann calls us to have Christian hope. Christian hope is directed towards a new creation of all things by God of the resurrected Christ. Through the resurrection, God created newness out of an old creation. We are that newness. Please pray with me. Creator God, let us be aware of how the Spirit brings us hope in you in our lives, and let us share our giftedness in an empowering and loving way. Help us affirm in our own part in the ongoing creation story, and give us comfort while we uncomfortably wait. Let us each live in the hope of the unseen, and help us know that your love is all the hope people need from us to give, all of us to give, so that we can also embrace the unseen. Amen.